I'm just going to go to the JCC for basketball now.
Okay.
So it's on now. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good class. Bye, guys.
My son is, he's only 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And different group,
Oh, yeah, he's in God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I don't like penalizing those all the time, so if you want, I'll be happy to start.
In the elevator.
That's fine. It doesn't matter. We're going to switch up the snack cup.
Wait, so should I not use this cup?
You can bring it out here so we'll recycle it.
Okay, so welcome.
Hi.
We're going to learn about Chinuch, Chanuka. The two words obviously share almost all the same letters. So there is a correlation, and there's a lot of practical manifestations that come out of this. The starting point, before I get into the actual etymology, so to speak, of the two words, the starting point is our children are not really our children. They're 100% gifts, and we are partners with God in raising them, but in the big picture, which is we are a what do you call it? In the chain, a link. Each of us, we're links in a chain, starting with Avram and Sarah. So, in that sense, we're preparing for our children to continue the same chain of Musara, the same chain of transmission. The transmission is not just bringing a physical child into the world. That is the mitzvah of Puravu, be fruitful and multiply. But if we just unpack that, what's the purpose of being fruitful and multiplying? What is the actual purpose of that?
Hi.
Yay, how are you?
Hi. Oh, it's nice and toasty in here. Or else I just took the stairs.
So we do have. Oh, yeah. When will it open? No. Do you want the ring open?
Sure. You're okay?
Yeah. Just a bit. Yay.
Is that okay?
Hi. Sorry? Okay.
I'll take the stairs then.
So we're going to look at the etymology of the word Chinuch and Chanuka, and it has a lot of practical manifestations. Before we begin, I'm just laying down the fact that the mitzvah to bring children into the world is obviously not just a physical birth of the child, but in raising the child, what are we really raising that child to become? What's the real purpose behind that?
Oh, you're asking?
Yeah, I won't make anyone uncomfortable. There's no wrong answers in my class. You can ask your daughters.
Or I need smoked.
Sorry?
Yeah. Observe Torah and smoked.
Yeah, it's a chain of transmission of our children learning Torah and mitzvahs. The actual mitzvah of Puravu is applicable to all of mankind. Chapter 1, verse 28. So Hashem is actually commanding Adam and all his future children, and later on it's actually repeated 8 times in the Torah, but he reiterates the same mitzvah after Noach is born, after Noach survives the the flood. So we see that this is a mitzvah that predates the Torah itself. So it is, for us, it is the transmission of Torah mitzvahs. What is the main reason for bringing kids into the world? That is the correct answer. So behind that is really that the child should have the das, the mind, to know that God exists. And with that, all the implications that if God exists, and He created the universe, and He communicated to mankind, both prior to the Torah and then from the Torah onwards through the Torah, so that means that He's got instructions. What are those instructions? So that's really the ultimate purpose of bringing children into the world, and not just the actual mitzvah of bringing children into the world. So Hashem, in His wisdom, decided that instead of children growing out of the ground or growing from trees, which some mothers actually, I could really believe, might have preferred it would be designed that way. It's a lot less painful. But in His wisdom, He decided that every child would be umbilically related to mum. Every child will be raised by a father and a mother, and in that sense, our investment in the child is unlimited. We probably will get to, I'm not sure if it will be this particular class, when we look at the word Ava in Hebrew, we'll see something very interesting when we look at the three-letter root, Ohev. It's going to help us see what is it about the child that I have a mitzvah to love. What is it about myself that I have a mitzvah to love? What is it about my children that I have a mitzvah to love? So, Chanuka, there's a lot of different ways you can say what's the message of Chanuka. Any suggestions? What's the message of Chanuka? No problem.
Like it's survival and resilience.
Resilience. So a huge message in the festival of Hanukkah is resilience. Looking at that a little more, you've got literally a handful of sons of Matisyahu fighting against an entire Greek army. And we are in the end victorious. It wasn't a battle that we won for the whole of Eretz Yisrael as sometimes thought of. It's actually a battle for Yerushalayim, and specifically the Beis HaMikdash. And because of what the Beis HaMikdash represents, which is a relationship directly with our Creator. So in that sense, survival, resilience, determination, continuity, and the word Chanukat Habayit, which partially comes from Chanukkah, but it came obviously from the dedication of the first temple. The word Chanukat Habayit means what? So Rashi tells us, when Avraham Avinu went to fight against the four kings who had kidnapped and taken hostage Lot and his family, his daughter, he went. The wording there is in chapter 14, verse 14. Vayarik Chanichav. He emptied out from the word rake. He emptied out from the best medrash. That was a complaint against Avraham Avinu. He emptied out all his students from best medrash to go into the army. But he took all his men, Chanichav, who were trained. Rashi tells us Chanichav, they were mechunach in mitzvahs. The Medrash Haggadah says they were mechunach, they were trained. The word chinuch means training. They were mechunach b'milchama, in combat. They had already learned how to fight. That's basic training for knowing how to defend oneself in a world that, if you ever need to, you need to be able to defend and, if necessary, attack. So the word chinuch, Rashi is telling us, chapter 14, verse 14, easy to remember, 14:14, that the word chinuch means training. He then adds on to explain the word training slightly more detail, so you can really unpack and see the mechanics. What is training? So he says it's a lashon. Chinuch is a lashon. We translate it as educate. So it's not a bad translation. It's not accurate because it really doesn't give you. It really doesn't give you the pieces to put together to understand what do we mean by educate. You look up a good English Oxford dictionary. You'll see that educate means to deliver information. But what you're going to discover is the word chinuch actually is the opposite. It's to retrieve information. It's to actually extrapolate information. Meaning that the child already has wisdom inside them. And that we have to teach them what they can't learn on their own. But after we've taught them what they can't come to on their own, now there's enough information that you can actually ask questions to make their mind tap into its natural curiosity and then find answers by themselves. That's really meant to be the full model of the school that you're sending your children to. That it's all about growing the mind. But not because the teacher is there to grow the mind. The teacher is not the seed, your child is the seed. The teacher is here to provide the necessary conditions, whether it's the fertile soil, the sunshine, the wind, the rain, etc. So in chinuch really means start again. And the language of Rashi there, chapter 14, verse 14, is hu lashon haschalas kanisas ha'adam. It's the language of the beginning. Haschalas means starting, beginning. Knisas Adam, of a person entering, be'umnus, in some sort of trade, craft, skill, she'atid lamoid ba, that in the future he will stand in. The language here is a very, very specific. It's actually taken from Chazal, Medrash Haggadah, on that pasuk. Amida, we translate as standing, it's correct, but actually it represents something far deeper. When you say someone can stand on their own 2 feet, what do you mean by that expression? They can do this on their own. So what really is the crux, literally the crux of Chinuch, is training a child to be independent. That's what the word gadol actually means. I think I may have shared that with you. I don't remember. I didn't share that with you. So it's a little bit parenthetic, but it's huge. See, a katan in legal language is a child. A gadol in Hebrew, in halachic legal language, is a gadol is an adult who's independent. He's called an adult, or she's called an adult because she's independent. But we can actually see that even though the word gadol, we usually translate it as great. But what do we mean by great? What's great about being a gadol? And the answer is, this is based on the Vilna Gaon. He tells us, if you want to know the meaning of any letter in the Torah, find where it first appears at the beginning of a word. Where it first appears at the beginning of a word, that word is the definition of that letter. He learns this from a Gemara in Baba Kama, Daf Nun Hey, which talks about if you saw the letter Tet, if you see this letter in your dream, then that's a very good sign. Says the Vilna Gaon, because the first time the letter Tet is found in the Torah at the beginning of a word is in the word Toiv. And so he says Toiv is the essence of Tet. So the essence of Gimel, interestingly, it's the first time it's found is in the word Ha Gedolim. The letter Hey is a definite article, so it's not part of the word. And therefore, the great ones, in reference to the 2 sons. There were 2 sons, and then one was reduced to be now the moon. So the word Gadol first appears in reference to the sons. What does Gadol mean? So, says the Vilna Gaon, if you look at the letter Gimel, when you spell it out, every letter in the Hebrew alphabet has multiple meanings. One of them is defined by where it first appears in the beginning of a word. The most obvious one is the name of the letter itself. So the word Gimel, when it's spelled out, what does Gimel mean?
3?
Sorry?
I don't know, just 3 comes to mind.
3, the letter 3 is the gematria of Gimel. What does Gomel mean? What is Gamal? Gamal is a camel. So one of its meanings is a camel. Has multiple meanings. Lashon HaKodesh is a perfect language. It's created by a Kodesh Baruch Hu.
Like to give, maybe?
Give, excellent. Gomel means give, as in Gomel Chesed. When you're doing acts of kindness, you're giving. Strangely, chapter 21, when Sarah gives birth to Yitzhak, the pasuk there, the verse says, "Vayigdal hayeled," the child grew, "Vayigamal," and she stopped giving him. She weaned him. So very strangely, the word "goimel" means to give, and it also means to wean, to stop giving. Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the Universe, in English you've got a word for giving and a separate word for weaning. Why do you have one word, goimel? It means both. And there are no mistakes in this language, because if it means both and they're opposites, it means it's both. Because what's the purpose of giving to your child? And giving, and giving, and giving. In order to wean them off. To one day stop giving. So says the Vilna Gaon, you can see this in the word Gadol, because Gimel is the giving letter. It's actually, according to the Maharal of Prague, Gimel is a female letter. All the letters have a different gender. Gimel is a female letter, Vav is a male letter, we might learn about that later. Dal, what's Dal on its own mean? Dal means poor, it's poverty. A very low level of poverty. And it's not referring to financial poverty, it's actually worse than financial poverty. What's worse than financial poverty? Sorry? Spiritual poverty, which starts off where? Where does spiritual poverty really begin? So, dull refers to a poor mind. And it doesn't mean unintelligent. Actually, it can be, a person could have 3 or more PhDs, and I could still have a dull mind. Even in English, the word dull, dull sense of humor, dull mind, I think probably originates from here because it comes from the word poor. Poor doesn't mean financially or in any other way. It just simply means that my mind is thinking poorly. What's a poor mind? So I could be extremely blessed. Children, family, extended family, wealth, all sorts of good things in my life. But if I'm a chronic complainer and I can see so much wrong in my daughter, my son, my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, poor thinking actually makes me into a poor mind because I am so blessed. I saw a great line recently, either be grateful or a great fool. There's so much to be grateful for that when I shift my focus way too much on the complaining of what's not right in this kid, in this family, in my life, what I end up becoming is a fool because I'm not paying attention to the blessings Hashem is giving me. And it's not denial of the bad, it's actually how to deal with the bad. Because the stronger we are up here, the better equipped we are to deal with a kid who needs more help. There's no such thing as a child that is not perfect. Now that sounds crazy, but it's really true. Every child before Bat and Bar Mitzvah is a perfect child. They make no any mistakes they make is on my accounting. It's not on, the clock's not ticking till they're Bat Mitzvah for a girl, they're more mature than boys, 13 for a boy. So the clock's only ticking when they're called a bar da'at. Their mind is sufficiently developed that they can be held responsible for their actions, for what they're saying, for what they're thinking. So gadol really means the gimel is giving to the dal, the poor person, till they are able to think for themselves. Gadol really means great in thinking. They're great because they can think for themselves. But if I'm just a carbon copy of you, what's the point? I saw a great line, I may have shared it with you, I think I probably did, from Oscar Wilde. Some people might not like me quoting from him, but anyway, he had a great line, be yourself. Everyone else is taken. Being myself means, if I'm just going to be a carbon copy of my father and my mother, I have not really been raised to be who I'm supposed to be. And that's why Rav Dessler tells us, we say in Shemona Esrei, Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzhak, Elokei Yaakov. Why not just say, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Why do you have to put Hashem's name next to each one? So, answers Rav Dessler, each one of them was from, not because of his parents. On his own, he forged his own relationship with his Creator. So, yes, it helps a lot to have from parents, but if you do it on your own, wow, that's very powerful. So a Baal Teshuvah on their own, or a Gyares on their own, okay, that's huge.
What about the opposite then? Like someone has religious parents and they decide to.
Right.
Has the parent then failed?
Excellent question. It's interesting, in Lashon HaKodesh, we actually don't have a word for failure. And the reason why is because it's an innocent misunderstanding of reality. There is no such thing as failure. The reason why is because even if I could have made much better decisions in how I raised this particular kid, that child, she hits 12, boy 13, they are responsible. And as much as they can blame me or parents or grandparents, there comes a point where Hashem says, stop playing victim. I gave you a mind. And your parents may have made mistakes, but they did their best. And if they did make mistakes, hey, we're in really good company. Because Avraham Avinu had a Yishmael, Yitzhak had an Esav, and there have been some mistakes along the way. David HaMelech had an Avshalom. Adoniyahu, his youngest son, usurped his authority at the end of his life. So a person shouldn't think, oh my, I really messed up. Well, I could have done some better decisions, but in the end, everyone's accountable for themselves. It's very, very, very difficult for someone who's really got a mind of their own to blame everyone. We're living in a woke society where handouts and not taking responsibility and being encouraged not to take responsibility and lowering the level of education with multiple choice and now culturally allowing for certain segments to be equal entrance into major universities. It's all an artificial lowering of the educational standards, and it's not servicing children. Children are not growing up so well because of so many crutches, and the industry, I call it Inc., I call it Trauma Inc., where instead of helping children become stronger for what they're going through, we over-empathize, we make out that they really are victims, and before you know it, we're mollycoddling them instead of helping them become independent, strong for themselves. So we're going to see in the actual words, the word Chinuch means training, and it also means start again. And that's exactly what Hanukkah was. We started again. We re-lit the candles, and every year we do that to remind ourselves we are never finished. And it's astonishing because if I ask quick show of hands, how many of you went to school with a Roman? Babylonian? A Byzantine? See, everyone has had a good go at us, and you can see it on the timeline who's been at us. We've had where are we? Here we are. We've had the Egyptians had a good go, that's the 10 Marques. The Babylonians, they've had a good go at us. The Persians with Haman. The Greeks, they were the worst in the sense that they were not trying to destroy our bodies, they were destroying our minds. They were confusing us. They were glorifying the body, glorifying architecture, glorifying food, glorifying sports, etc., which we don't actually have a problem with each one of those independently, but not as a culture of it and in of itself. We don't glorify food for its sake. Well, today's generation, maybe, I don't know. It depends which hotel you go to. But the purpose of food is to live, but not for itself. I don't have to tell you where vomitariums come from. It's originally a Greek word, but the Romans actually had rooms where they would make room in their stomachs to go back and for the fifth course, etc. So, and then you got Angolas Edom, which was still in. We've had the Crusades, the Inquisition. Almost everybody's had a go at it. Now we've got we've had the Holocaust, and now we've got jihad. So Hanukkah is an amazing event because we're still lighting the exact same candles from 2,400 years ago, commemorating that God is always with us, and that when we stand up for what's right, Hashem can help 5 people overcome an entire army of all the Greek legions against just 5 Jews. That makes no sense, and that's exactly our history. It makes no sense. So resilience is really part of the message of Hanukkah. Starting again. Starting again. How many times? How many times would you set a limit to how many times a child has to crawl before they can stand? Would you set a limit to how many times a child has to finally stand before they can walk? You don't set a limit. Why don't you set a limit? Because Chinuch, Hanuch, Na'ar, you train the child according to Darkoi, the way of the child. So the strength of the child, how his metabolism, his physical strength, and of course the mind. So there's no such thing as a cap on a kid. We're talking about in the outside of autism, etc. But essentially there's no cap. And if you really want to learn more about autism, then there's a famous book, Sunrise, S-O-N, Rise, by Barry Kaufman, which is fascinating work, where I think it was 11 specialists all told him the same thing. Your child will never be able to walk, talk, or count to 10 if you listen to the prophets of doom. So the very last one of the specialists told him, I can give you a list of what you have to do therapeutically for this child, the physical therapy, but it's going to require a tremendous amount of inner strength from you, the parents, to see your child go through this. And they did. And the kid actually wrote the foreword to his father's book, Sonwise, S-O-N-Wise. The kid is one of the best, the highest paying salespeople in real estate in Winnipeg, Canada, and he also won championships in ping pong. It's quite fascinating, but I'm not going there now. I'm just explaining. Never put a cap on a kid. In the language of the Torah, this is al-pi drush, is not the simple meaning of the words. But in chapter 19 of the book of Deuteronomy, we have a mitzvah, lo tasig gvul re'echa. Do not move the gvul means boundary. Don't move the boundary line of your neighbor, your friend. Meaning, you move the gate, the fence, more into his property, so you gain more property that way. So that's called hasagas gvul. That's it's a form of stealing, literally. So if you read the words al pi drush, lo tasig, you will never reach gvul, the boundary of your friend, because there are no boundaries. The human mind is unlimited how much love they can achieve in their lifetime, how much appreciation, how much admiration for the people closest to them, how much they can believe in a person and give them another chance and another chance and another chance. There's no limit to how much patience we are capable of, and Hashem, because He loves us so much, He keeps sending us exercises in patience, in dealing with difficult and different people. So starting again is really part of the Bria, and every child knows it. Every child knows it, at least till first grade. They're brilliant. They know it because their body and their mind work in tandem. They know that they have to fall hundreds of times till they can stand for the first time. And when they make that first step, what will be the next step? Whoa, they're gonna fall. And how many times will they move one step forward and fall? Hundreds of times, until they can stand and then eventually learn the distribution of their body weight to be able to. So Chinuch is really starting again. That is what training is. How many times? As many times as the child needs to, till they can stand, until they can walk, until they can run. How many times will they play on a tricycle, with the training wheels before they can just go with a two-wheeler? And the answer is as many times as it takes till they're independently riding. So independence is really the real concept of a gadol. That's what gadol really means, independent. And it's really in the word gimel, which means give, and mal. What's mal on its own mean? Mal means to cut off, as in bris milah. Mal means to cut off. When the child is maleh, when the child is full, that's when you cut off, you wean the child off, and now they're ready to eat solids. Oh, so weaning the child off from the mother is another step in the journey of the child's independence. Their full independence is when they are a gadol. Some of you are familiar with grandparents who maybe, or great-grandparents who went through the war and were selected at 8 or 9 or 10 years old to work in the camps. We had in the other room just last week a Holocaust survivor, Mrs. Kenner was the name. She was interviewed by your daughters. Sonia interviewed her, and who else? Okay.
My fourth grader told me that.
Yeah?
Yeah, the name's not numbers.
Yeah, names not numbers. She's 98 years old, and she was 10 years old when the war broke out, and she was working in Auschwitz and in Buchen, not Blinker, Bergen-Belsen. She was doing slave labor. Extraordinary. I know my father went to work at 9, but he was an actor, 8, 9 years old, and my father-in-law actually went to work at 9 years old as well. That was in Afghanistan. It was not unusual in our parents, grandparents' generation for young children, their physical bodies were exerted in work that was actually productive. I'm not saying right, wrong, Nazis and this and that. I'm just saying children are extraordinary in what they're capable of, but we don't squeeze enough out of them. So, for example, I'm just throwing out examples. There was no reason, I may have shared this with you on other occasions, so I apologize for the repetition. If really the purpose of a gadol is to cause them to become maleh, full, so that they can be cut off from and go to the next level of independence, so who should be responsible for the child's clothing the night before school? And at what age do you think they're capable of selecting their socks, blouse, skirt, trousers, whichever parts of their outfits that they need to, the shoes? How old do you think they should be capable of doing that?
Depends what you want them looking like.
Yeah.
That's for sure one a good answer.
Yeah, good. Too, right?
3 years old.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years old. I once had many years ago a parent complain to me that I thought that was like maybe 7 or 8 made more sense. So I remember asking, can your 5-year-old figure out Photoshop? That's what was coming out at the time. Can your kid figure out how to use a Photoshop program without using the manual because he can't read yet? And he was like, yeah. Oh, so help me understand. This kid can actually figure out what for many of us is a complicated software program without reading the manual, and he can't select the right, or she can't select the right clothes the night before and place them in a neat pile by the bedside table or night table, whatever you call it, in preparation for tomorrow. Can the kid learn, this is the milky sink, this is the meaty sink, this is where we put the dirty plates, etc. So the more I give others to do for my kid, am I really doing a service to my child? So you might argue there's economics involved here, and maybe the answer is yes, but on the deeper level, so to speak, how am I training the mind of my child moving forward into the future to be independent, to be self-disciplined, to be self-sufficient, to be able to swim on their own? There are actually 4 items that we have an obligation to our child for, which are generic items. One is to teach Torah, and it doesn't mean so they can go and listen to a class. It means that they can open up a sefer, a text, and make sense of it on their own. Oh, so it's the purpose of teaching Torah is to help the child become independent in learning. The second one is to have an umnus, a skill, something that people will pay money for this particular value that this person is offering. Oh, so a craft, a skill, a profession. Oh, what's the purpose of that? So the child can become financially independent of mom and dad, which is usually around about 36, 40 years old, I think, by today's standards, whatever. Pure humor, no reflection on reality whatsoever. So here you have a situation where the Torah is telling me my obligation to the child is to help them become independent, even financially. And the third one is to marry them off. Oh, so what's that about? They become their own independent unit, build their own family. Of course, there's the emotional support, maybe some financial support at the beginning, etc. But the real goal, when you look at all of the 4, we've covered 3, Torah and umnus, a profession, and getting married. And the 4th one, interesting, is yesh omrim, some say, is swim. I've got to teach my kids to swim. What's that about? Survival. In a situation where they can't rely on something that would keep them afloat, literally or metaphorically, they've got to be able to stand up for themselves. They've got to be able to swim for themselves. So you see that the uniting theme throughout the concept of chinuch is actually training the child till they are independent. And what's the process? As many times as it takes to start again, start again, start again, or whatever stage that they're at. So being able to do homework before going to play. I'm not suggesting you have to do that, because some kids need to be home instead of taking school back home. So, but if they want to play on the computer, and you know that it's going to drag on, so maybe first 20 minutes, I'm just throwing out a number. It can be 20 minutes, half an hour, and then you've got to finish your homework. Or do you want to do your homework first and get extra time on the computer? So there are ways to negotiate it, but the point really being that you give the child choices that they are choosing, but you're also simultaneously training them to be independent, in control of themselves, as opposed to, I'll get to the homework later. Yes, but when is later? 11 o'clock at night, and then I don't get to sleep properly, I've got to be up for the bus, etc. So it's the compass, the internal compass that's behind all this is what is leading this child to more independence.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you have like multiple children
Yes.
and limited amount of time,
Yes.
how can you give them all the independence to like start doing for themselves without having it be a disaster?
Right.
How
Excellent question.
do you do that?
It's kind of ironic. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but it's kind of ironic that, let's say, the larger the family, the easier it gets, because the delegation of responsibility to the older ones as a privilege, not as a punishment, Hasbah Shalom, and it's really quite remarkable how when a child is responsible for something, that the reward is just the sense of productivity and contribution that they have for helping the child, a younger child with homework, or teaching a younger kid how to throw a ball, etc. So the more children one has, ironically, the more one can delegate. I've been in families, for example, at the Shabbos meal, where mum and dad are sitting like king and queen, and the older kids are serving. And they know what to do, but that didn't come about automatically. It wasn't from instruction. It was, as we're going to talk about, role modeling. Mummy did the baking so many times with the children, the cooking with the children, where the food goes in the refrigerator, in the freezer, how to label it so we can easily find it, and then who's in charge of covering the lights, who's in charge for Friday afternoon, who's in charge of preparing the Shabbos candles. It might be daddy, I don't know, but what ends up happening is the more responsibility that we're giving out to the children, even at a relatively young age, the easier it can actually get on the parents. It's not in the early years, it's harder, but as they get older and there's more children to delegate to, it can actually be a lot easier. I just spent Shabbos with the family. Husband and wife sat the whole time at the table. I don't think they got up for anything. But it's like that. Happens to be the oldest son is 11, and he actually bakes all the sourdough. It's remarkable. I buy 2 loaves of sourdough every week, and it's extraordinary. He starts on Tuesday. He takes his orders and he makes money from it. I've always encouraged children and parents to have what I may have mentioned this earlier, but I call it family bank, and that basically means you have a register of like what they used to have with bank when you write checks, the check register. So you have the date, then you have the number of the check if you're writing out a check, and then the description of the transaction. So it might be a gift, it might be work they did at home that you don't consider part of just being the family. It's like extra, and yet they're going to get paid for. It might be an allowance that you give the child. It might be a gift from grandparents. Whatever it is goes in the register, and then the balance. And what ends up happening is that children learn, and it's really important, I think, to teach financial responsibility at a relatively young age. I would say starting with 5 or 6. It sounds crazy, but I really do mean it, because I had such a difficult time when my wife and I, our first 3 kids were all boys, gave us a real run for our money, and it was just really hard, especially with my wife going shopping and I want, and we came up with a formula. The answer to can I have is, can you afford it? But I have no money. Okay, so we're going to figure out a way you can earn your own money. Some of it will be allowance, some of it will be gifts from grandparents, some will be for birthday money, but a lot of it will be, we're going to give you ideas of what you can do around the house and outside the house to earn your own money. So this kid, for example, he makes a small fortune just baking bread. But I've known families that did take on, if you want more details, I'll share it with you another time, or by email, and I can send you also pictures of the checks and the register, and I have something called an envelope that, it's called an envelope. It's an envelope that has written on it, my buy a dream envelope. It's a buy a dream envelope, and on it you cut out, well nowadays I don't know how you do this, but there used to be something called Sears Magazine. Allah Shalom. I actually have a friend, Rabbi Berger, who's got a Sears Magazine from 1914. He actually called Sears to ask, there's a suit here that's going for 89 cents. I'm wondering if it's still on sale, because it's on page X. So they said, which magazine do you have? Since 1914. I said, no, it's not. So see, you just cut out or paste or take a photo, snapshot, and cut out the picture of what the child wants to save for, place it on the front of the envelope, and I said, I am saving for. And then on the other side of the envelope, you have like those mercury temperature things where you color in, and the gradations have the amount of money that you're at the top, and how much along the way, so the child colors it in as they go towards that. These are simple ways that you can get the kid involved in being responsible for what they buy with their own money. And I'll just add on a little piece. I'm not sure if I'm fully answering your question, but it's because the questions like that really deserve to be tailored. And by the way, the word chinuch means tailoring. It's actually a Mishnah in Moed Katan, Perek Aleph Mishnah Vav, that in the old days they had catacombs, not always graves in the ground, but they would go into a cave and they would dig through in the walls of the cave, and they would bury people inside those catacombs. So there was called Machanchim. I've forgotten the name for catacomb in Hebrew. Hakuchim. Machanchim Hakuchim, I think it is. Machanchim doesn't mean educate, it means tailor. It was exactly to the size of the person, so you didn't have to cut more stone or limestone, which is much easier to cut through than you need to. So a question like that really deserves a more tailored answer, but generally speaking, this is one of the ways you can help children become much more responsible. And if you feel you want to give them something for working in preparation for Shabbos, and it goes on their family bank, that's another way to motivate them. But it's a motivation where they are really working, and like in Montessori, it's called the work cycle, and the works. Those are the names of the materials on the shelves, because Montessori wanted to give a positive association to work. That I'm working because I'm growing as I work from shelf to shelf, and I actually experience the progress as I learn Aleph base, and now I'm learning Nakudas, and now I'm learning blending, now I'm learning reading accuracy, now I'm learning fluency, now I'm learning vocabulary, now I'm learning basic dictuk or prefix suffixes. So the child, even if they can't articulate to you their progress, they understand, oh, I understand this Mora, this teacher is here to move me along a very specific journey, Darkai, of the child, to get to more and more levels of independence. So these are very simple ways. I really believe in the family bank. I know my own kids did it, and between them, I had no idea until they were married how much money they actually had saved up. But it's really remarkable what kids are capable of. Any questions on that? Yes.
Is there such a thing as giving them too much independence? So when you give the example of the parents who didn't give up the whole meal,
Yes.
is it fair that the child has to take on the role that would ordinarily be the mother's? Or like when you see mothers who have lots of children, and
Yes.
the older ones are responsible for bath and park. And
Right.
how do you balance that a child has their childhood and their own life with
Yes.
also having...
Yeah, as the kids get older, especially the girls, they can get resentful if they're depended upon for a lot of work at home. And so you're 100% correct. It's an ongoing work in progress, where one of my jobs, if you want to call it, wearing the parent hat, is to keep my fingers as much as possible on the temperature of where this kid is enjoying the privilege versus reaching a point of overwhelm, or it's infringing on their desire to spend more time on the phone with their friends because they're now teenagers, like around about 10, 11, I think, or 9, I think they become teenagers, I'm not sure. It was 8. Okay, so, but it comes a point where there are ways for me to offer an extra privilege of time out together, sometimes taking them out from school. I shouldn't be saying that in the school, but that's what I used to do with my own boys. I'd take them out for pizza. Sometimes the school didn't like it, so I said, well, who's paying your salary? So sometimes you really have to. That they don't like it, but if you mean it, you'll get away with it. Trust me, because you're not doing it because you want them to get less education. You're actually doing it because you want to preserve your relationship, build the relationship, and they're just going to be happier learners because school's not prison. I'm not stuck here. There are ways out. So I agree with you. It's something to keep a close eye on. Generally speaking, I'm just speaking very generally, the more kids are left alone, the faster they grow up. That's just generally speaking. I have a relative who unfortunately fell into deep depression as a teenager, and then ended up pregnant from a drug pusher, not just a someone who pushed. That's much worse. And ended up having 5 children from that one person. And what's extraordinary is that all 5 children on their own became religious. That's amazing. It blows my mind. And that kind of brings me to where I wanted to start, and that is we are parenting our children, but we're not actually the full picture. God is so much the third partner, but actually he's much bigger a partner than we are. Because every time our back is turned, whether it's because we send them onto the school bus, or they're in school, or they're in college, or they're in the seminary, or they're in yeshiva, wherever they are, we're just giving them the best seeds we can plant and the best environment at home that we can, with the most nurturing smile and love and hugs and everything else. But ultimately, God is protecting them all the time, and who they meet up with, who they get bullied by, who they bully, who they are strong with, who they are weak with. We have very little monitoring of that, very little, if any at all. And what's really going on inside the mind of the child, many times the kid doesn't know. So what I'm bringing out is not something to fear, but to know that our biggest partnership with God is our prayers. It's not like, oh yeah, I know that. No, especially Friday night lighting candles for the mother. If you're prone to tears, be comfortable with your tears, because all other gates are closed except that one. Gates to tears, God can't close those gates. You can open any gates with your tears. And it's the tears for one's children, now and into the future. Please Hashem, you've gifted me this child to become a servant of you. And the servant is not a very good translation, but Eved actually means someone who's extremely disciplined. That's what Eved really is. Someone who's extremely in control of themselves, to the point where, let's say, Eliezer called himself Eved Abraham. When he introduced himself, he didn't give a name. He said, I'm Eved Abraham. That was his definition of himself. But it's actually a huge compliment that he did his best to replicate all the midot, all the character traits and personality and values of his master, to the point that he could actually claim he is a completely self-disciplined person who follows the way his master taught him. And so that's what Eben, that's what a Talmud really is. With their own personality, they have gleaned and drunk from the wells of the teacher, but it's really their personality, their independent personality that comes forth. But it was from the well of the waters of that teacher. But what I'm bringing out is, what am I bringing out? Hashem takes our tears, especially when you're mafresh challah, if you do that, especially when you're lighting Shabbos candles in Yom Tov, and at any time, all year long, where you're waiting at the red light, whatever it is, and you're saying a quick tefillah for a particular child or all your children, generic or specific or both. All this is accumulative. The Reb Chaim Brisker was very famous for being asked what does he attribute his 10 sons who became giants in Torah, each one in their own right. He said 3 words: Tehillim mit demois, Psalms with tears. So Psalms, as you probably figured out, is really 150 love songs to God. It's just David HaMelech most of the time praising and thanking him, even though he was the most he suffered the most than any human being. But David HaMelech's constant singing to God was his trademark. And that became the trademark of the Christian world. They're singing, over 10 million Christians every Sunday morning are singing psalms. And this all comes from David HaMelech because he was able to capture the full gamut of human experience and put it into words. Much of it is pouring out his soul to God in the pain that he went through, but the vast majority of it is actually praise and thank you. And that's what we're here to celebrate. Thank you, God, you gave me this child. Not always easy. And as they get older, gets a little more of a challenge. And as they get married, a little bit more of a challenge. When they have kids, it's even more of a challenge. the biggest challenge I personally would say is letting go. And saying, God, this is your child too. I'm doing my best, and most of the time, as the kid grows up, the best I can do is keep out of the kid's face. I'm just speaking generically, I'm not in a general sense, but every situation is different. If you've got a very close relationship with a child, that's wonderful, keep it going. Don't let that child become the substitute for their spouse later on, meaning don't let you be the substitute. Letting go is not easy, but it's the most powerful thing to do. That is the real love of every mother, that they let go of feeding the child from themselves, and then let go of the child when they go to first days of school, and as they let the child go yeshiva, seminary, college, wherever it would be, it's not, all that letting go is purely love for this child to grow independent. It's a process all along the way. Any other questions? I'm going to go to, there's 7 parts to the word chinuch, so we've covered 2, and we've quick few. So help me, what's the 2-letter root of chinuch?
Chain.
Chain, excellent. What does chain mean?
Favor.
Favor. Chain is favor. Now what does favor mean? So we've mentioned this, I think, earlier in previous classes. Chain is interesting. It's a kasher she'ein nireh. That's the language of the discipler. It's an invisible connection. The chain that someone has, like Esther Malka, she was matzah chain b'chol ro'eh. Whoever saw her, they were like, they felt this charm, favor, or as we're going to use the word connection, they felt connected to this person. It's a connection. What is that connection? It's an invisible connection. Well, how does that help anyone? The invisible connection is the following. There's 2 things you cannot know what's going on inside a person. What they're thinking, and therefore what they're feeling. But where do you look to get a gauge? Where do you look to get some sort of measure? Look at the eyes, look at their facial expressions. The word panim we learned before is faces on the outside. Panim means inside. Rebbeinu Shalom, Master of the Universe, in English you've got one word for outside, the externals, you've got a separate word for essence, the inside, the panim. So why do you have one word which means both, and they're opposites, outside, inside? And God says, no, there's no mistakes in my language. The only place, unless you know how to read eyes or you're a reflexologist, you can figure out what's going on inside the body from checking the muscles, but otherwise, the most obvious place to look to see what's going on inside a person's world, what they're thinking and what they're feeling, is their facial expressions. So panim, facial expressions on the outside, is the face, the opening to your panim, to the inside. So this helps us understand that the chain as the actual 2-letter root of chinuch, education, training, teaching our children, the actual root of it is what I'm thinking about my kids and therefore what I'm feeling about them. So when I'm angry about what the kid said or did, it's because I'm thinking angry thoughts. They seem to be generated by my child, but actually I am the one who's creating these thoughts. Because I'm also capable of asking a different question. What might have happened in the child's world today that has them in this mood? Is it possible I could take as a compliment that they so easily get angry with me, mom, or dad, because they feel safe that no matter how much they get upset, I am not going to cancel my love. And therefore, they feel safe when they come home to actually open up, even though they may be full of emotion. So is it possible that instead of me taking personally their unkind words, oh, leave me alone, you won't understand anyway, is it possible I could ask myself, oh, sounds like this kid needs space, I'll revisit later, or should I take it, how dare you speak on your mother, do you know what I've been through? How dare you, go to your room, no computer tonight. So I can easily, you see, it's like I'm acting, but actually I've got a lot of practice. So I can easily fault the kid because I'm only reading the outside instead of reading what's going on inside. The kid is frustrated. Kids are never chutzpahdik, at least till 12 for girls, 13 for boys. That's what Rabbi Leib Steinman, he was very adamant about it. He got very upset when a Rebbe asked him in a Torah Masorah convention, what do you do when a kid is chutzpahdik, when he's defiant? So he banged on the table and said there's no such thing as a child that's defiant. If they're acting defiant, it's because they're asking for help. And if I read that defiancy is defiancy, I'm going to discipline, punish the kid in the name of educating the kid when what the kid actually might need is me to go over and say, I think something might be hurting or upsetting you. This might not be the best time to talk about it, but I want to know when and if you're ready, you can come to me. Now that's if we've built a rapport till now, but if I'm typically the one to fall into judgment easily about this kid, I'm probably not the best address, maybe some other relative or an older sibling or something. But the main piece I'm bringing out over here is that chen is actually an invisible connection. When it's favorable, that's the chen that we are used to. So it's an invisible connection, but it's not a mysterious connection. It's the same chen that we have for our spouses and for ourselves. What am I saying about myself? Because it's what I'm saying about myself that makes me feel what I feel about myself. There is no such thing as feeling without thinking. I can only feel my thoughts. We've talked about that at length, but when it comes to chinuch, a mechanech is a connector. We unfortunately use the word educator. I'm not saying it's a bad translation, but it's not getting a grip on what's really taking place. So now we can understand if someone is angry with the kid and really is angry with the kid is going to disconnect from that teacher. Do you follow the connection here? The connection is what I'm thinking and feeling. So Rambam, who actually talks about kaas, anger, he says there are two midot, there are two character traits that are so bad they never have a correct measure, because the word midah as character also means measure, because every midah has a measure. There's room for every single one of them, and claims Rambam in Hilchos Deis, the laws of the mind, of thinking, in chapter 2, I think it's halacha number 2, he talks there about kaas. He said, v'cheina kaas, in reference to gaiva, which is the first one he talks about, and arrogance, v'cheina kaas, and also anger. It's an extremely negative trait. It's correct for a person to distance himself from it, from anger, to the other extreme. Then he gives you one exception when anger will work. He says if it's kas hapanim, it's facial anger, below kas halev, but you're not feeling it. Oh, so the thoughts is not real anger, you're pretending. And he gives the example of when the person is just faking. Oh, so if it's fake anger, it's only on the outside. Actors do that all the time. They're only faking. That's why they're called an actor. So they're only acting, they're not really angry. So when a person fakes anger, the kid is picking up on the invisible connection. That you're not really thinking and therefore you're not feeling it, you're only pretending on the outside. So that's the only exception. And he gives that an exception for parents and for teachers and for leaders. That's the only way that anger will ever work. Otherwise, it's a disconnect. But parents have the almost unfair advantage that because you're umbilically related to this child, you can get away with lots of mistakes. Avraham Avinu made a lot of mistakes, but he never let go of his love for Yishmael, and Yishmael did come back. We know that he came back round about, he was thrown out of the house at 24. Yes, he was thrown out of the house at 24 years old, but he came back by the age of 51 for sure, because that's when Avraham Avinu, when he went in chapter 22 to the Akedah of Yitzhak, he took the Shnei Hanarim, the two young men. It's not the correct translation, that's the translation in every single siddur and Chumash. He took his two Masharatim, that's what Nara really means, two apprentices, which was Eliezer and Yishmael. Yishmael we know was 51 at the time. So he never let go of his love for Yishmael, and Yishmael knew it. So even though his father threw him out the house, he knew his father still loved him. Avraham Avinu used to go visit him every single year to check on him. So I'm not going into that now, it's a very interesting medrash, but the child knows that you love them, even if Chas v'Shalom one falls into anger, they still know that you'll never let go of that kid. So that this is also part of chinuch. It's a connection. You're a connector. When you're a mechanech in charge, you're connecting your child. There's another meaning for the word chen, which is very important here, and that's the targum. The targum, well, we got to 12:30, I apologize. So I'll finish off on the other meanings of chen next time. Any questions? Comments? Criticism?
Can we finish the class next week?
Sorry?
I said I don't know
Oh, so
scheduled, but
so-
still.
yeah. So I think unfortunately the 14th was a double thing. I'm not able to do the 14th. So please forgive me. We'll continue the next date on the calendar. I don't remember which one it is, but I won't be able to do it. When is no? It's 14th of January. I think is the one I can't do.
Do next
It's not
week
for
if
another
you're-
month.
And
If
he,
this is still connected to Hanukkah, is there time to?
We could do next week. There you go.
you want to do next Tuesday? What's next Tuesday?
The 24th.
The
24th.
24th? I don't have my 2024 here, but I think that's okay. Is that something that you would prefer? Because I have to cancel whichever's the next one on the calendar, which I think is the 14th of January? Yeah, 14th of January. So that would, if we did next week, we'd be skipping the 14th of January. Otherwise, I'll make it up another time. It's, you can
Could be a different
let the
day.
office know if you prefer to send a message to the office.
It's just a shame not to finish Hanukkah.
Sorry? Well, I'm not dafka going on Hanukkah as much as the concept that we're celebrating continuity and our resilience, and it's amazing. It's like October 7th really brought out a huge amount of unity amongst Jews all around the world, and it became a huge question mark for a lot of liberal Jews. Why am I Jewish? I've got all these people who hate me, but I'm not. What am I doing Jewish that they should hate me for being a Jew? I'm not connected to synagogue. I'm not connected to the land of Israel. So it's woken up a lot of people to revisit. Yeah, what's my identity? How do I look at myself? So it's a very big awakening. So that's what anti-Semitism has done very frequently in the past. And this time it seems to be with all the tragedy. There's a new level of connection. So Hanukkah is still here.
That's really great,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Actually,
Yes.
Sarah asked me about the Holocaust and if we've heard about it in school. And
Yes.
I was like, what do I tell her? Because I didn't know how to tell her. I didn't.
Yes.
I don't want to tell her so many people understand.
Yes. So you're 100% right. What I like to do is use the timeline. Rabbi Beryl White, he wrote a book. It's one large volume about 2,000 years of Jewish history, the last 2,000 years. And it's so interesting. He came up with the title because the last 2,000 years of our history has a lot of blood in the ground. Now, how do you sum it up? So his title of his book is Triumph of Survival. So in looking at the timeline and seeing how many times they stand up to destroy us, well, guess who's still here? So that we can talk about the Holocaust, but to do it in a context of not only are we survivors, but we've regained our numbers since the Holocaust in terms of well, that's not 100% true. We were 18 million, now about 14 million. In the land of Israel, there are about almost 8 million Jews living in the land of Israel, and it's growing very fast. So, putting Holocaust in context without going into details about the tragedy and the horrific trauma that people went through hourly every day. The lady last week, I hope it was okay for the girls, I didn't get to speak to them yet. She was saying that when she was 10 years old and she was in the ghetto in Lodz, the Nazis rounded up 10,000 children from the ghetto to be sent to Germany for work camps. And they were told to bring their luggage with them, and they were brought to the hospital for checking admits and everything else. And then in front of the parents who were behind the barbed wire, every single child was thrown out the window of the top floor into a truck and killed. And this is what mothers and fathers had to see with their own eyes. So I was concerned. That's vivid. One doesn't need to share anything of that sort with young minds. So I would always put it in the context of yes, we've had a lot of enemies. We still do. When Mashiach comes, it's all going to end. But we're still here. Yeah, even saying it almost with a half smile. The Holocaust survivor herself, I noticed her body language. She had a gentle smile throughout the almost 2 hours of being interviewed by all the girls. It was so interesting that you didn't get the slightest sense that she felt she's a Holocaust victim. I find it so interesting that the name for Holocaust survivors is survivors, because that's the point. And not just a physical survival, they got on with life,
Yes.
built
They
families.
get positivity and happiness out
Yeah.
of this survival, right?
Yeah, you would think that it would be completely
I'm
drowned
always
out.
so impressed about this. I experienced this. Yeah.
This is what that's our DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think children do better with us putting that down. Yeah,
I don't know if I did it right. I don't know. I told
it's never too late to change the
I know,
script.
I told you that they made us work just like in Egypt, but we won because we're Jews and people are jealous of us because we're the children. I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was just
Hashem-
saying, I'm
Hashem
like,
gave you
oh
the perfect
no.
words.
Okay, well,
Shows that everybody hates us. But that's why.
I'm like, I don't, yeah, okay. Next time, yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Can I ask a question? Is there like
I'm sorry?
is there a book that you should have with a bunch of parents? That's what I say. By the way, I had a number
Right.
Well, no, it's just, I would have liked to, I would imagine.
Okay, so now you can touch
Imagine
it
that
then.
now, just
Yeah.
to any
It's
side.
actually very good.
So I just,
I know, you
people,
From many, many decades ago.
yeah.
The basic is like they're used in
Can we pre-order? And I said, no.
celebrating the natural geometry.
They're like, right, it's kind of, it's not right,
So like,
It's
it's
gonna be
like,
better.
yeah, obviously you're
It's an amazing period in the life of the parents.
Yeah, it is.
she'll be getting.
Sometimes things.
I told her, she's like, smart play.
Well, no, one of them has to-
Oh, right.
Start at 12:30.
Oh, for sure. So that's more of your question.
Yeah, his meeting is 3 o'clock on Tuesday.
We have our first dinner. She's gonna be here. We're meeting her at 11.
To recommend a specific
Organize with a
book
lot
on
of
that
people,
subject.
It's not just that.
We do have, I wonder if we've got it here, but I have it at home.
By the way, Abby loves this one. It's so funny. I teach her so much. My son wants all the books by this author. By the way, I feel like your boys know. There's an author, Abby. It's not a bad idea. I never tell you.
I don't see it here. I have,
I can buy it.
yeah.
Oh, I go.
I'm trying to
Just do
remember the
it.
name. I have it
So
somewhere.
wholesome.
I know, but the kids like read books on books.
Yeah, I know. My daughter said she found my in a library book.
It's like
She
when
let me
magazines
know.
on Shabbos,
Me
I
too.
would, if anyone's read them, I
Yeah,
can't
like
take them to my bed.
But like,
So I
I
have
was
to read
thinking
them.
it should be this book, but I don't think that this is.
I don't like break.
Yeah.
My sister's not, you guys have Black Friday books? I don't like.
we go a lot. It's only because I buy so many books also, I have
I said, they're not up to reading that many, but now, like,
Why?
my niece took them, and they